For those of you who were with us for the last webinar, this is our second, and we're hoping that we will do this again probably next fall, maybe late fall, early winter. The idea for this came about by knowing that we were going to have a long, hard winter facing us in quarantine this year, and the idea came up at a staff meeting that what a great antidote it would be for anyone to get to see and meet the people that I'm so privileged to meet and work with every day, and to hear their stories directly. And that's really the idea behind Good People Talk Live. We are excited tonight to be able to present to you 4 incredibly dynamic and very smart women who have taken the reins and decided that they are going to respond to one of the biggest problems that this country is currently facing, or I don't even want to call it a problem, but an issue, and that is the issue of the large numbers of people who have come to this country. I used to refer to them as refugees or immigrants, and I have to say that I was very pleased to learn from one of these women that they had come up with another term, and that term is aspiring Americans. And I think that it is a beautiful, beautiful term, and indicates I don't think there could be a better way to describe who these people are. We hope that you will hear tonight what has spurred these women on to work within their own communities and even beyond. Their stories are, well, they're inspiring. I've already said that. The Good People Fund is very fortunate in that we are able to respond to issues that our society faces, and we're able to respond to them in a very quick way, in a very nimble. We're very nimble, and probably 4 years ago, I reached out to Kari Miller. Because the issue of immigration to this country was becoming a very serious issue. A lot of it had to do with the administration, and there were large numbers of people. And one of our donors actually told me about Kari, and I picked up the phone and called her. So
it was a great day for me.
Yeah, and from Kari, I learned a little bit about Sloane. Actually, was the one who contacted me, I think 2 or 3 years ago, in an email saying that I know that you don't take solicitations, but I just wanted to tell you about my work. And it was through Sloane that we met Kristen, who's working in South Florida. And it is through one of our board members, Peter Freemark, that we learned about the work that Dr. Eva Moya is doing in El Paso. So before I introduce everyone, I just want to say, if you have any questions that you would like to ask, put them in the chat box, and we hope we'll get to them at the end of everyone's presentations. And so with nothing further to add from me, I'm just going to introduce you to our very esteemed group of women. Dr. Eva Moya, who is a professor of social work at University of Texas in El Paso. Eva does not work with any specific organization. She doesn't head up an organization. She's just a good person doing amazingly good things. We then have Kristen Bloom, who does her great work down in South Florida in Miami, and heads up the Refugee Assistance Alliance, which is actually in Coral Gables. And Kari Miller, who is the founder and executive director of International Neighbors in that great college town of Charlottesville, Virginia. And finally, Sloane Davidson, who was the founder and executive director of Hello Neighbor in Pittsburgh. And we'll also let Sloane tell us a little bit more about what she has done besides founding Hello Neighbor, where some very interesting embellishments of that original work. I'm going to ask each of you if you would just give us a little bit of a story about what drove you to doing this work. I'm sure, I know that you could all be doing something else. So Ava, would you like to be the first to give us your story?
Okay, thank you so much, Naomi and Piers. I think I feel very honored and very fortunate. The story begins with, I'm a borderlander. What does that mean? In the context, sometimes people think that that's my last name. So I would love to have that as a last name. But a borderlander is sort of like this product of the U.S.-Mexico border region where you're trapped between two countries and you almost feel the product of a third. So that's who I am. I'm trained in social work. So for the last 35 years, I've been in the trenches of service. And most recently, I've been in academia. So academia gives you a very interesting perspective. I came late into the academic world. I trained with community health workers, primarily in Mexico. So they really taught me how to engage communities, how to be grounded on people's assets, regardless of the significant needs that they have. I'm a product of migration, immigration. Sometimes sort of like even immigration, but sometimes sort of like irregular immigration. So I'm a product of these two countries and the realities of why people move and get displaced. It all started really the humanitarian work, specifically with New Americans through my friend, Darlene Bailey, who is a very dear friend of Peter, Big Peter, who is very much linked with the Good People Fund, who then said there are teddy bears, Eva, that need to be moved. The teddy bears need to go to children. Do you think you can make the move and the placement of teddy bears possible for my friend, Peter? And I said, I have no idea what does that mean, but let's connect. So it was really the Good People Fund that allowed me to connect with Peter. The teddy bears made it to El Paso in one box, and then came a second, and then 10 boxes, and then 20, and then 30. And I was in a hospital a couple of weeks ago, and I remember getting a wonderful text from my friend Peter, who said, there are another 10 boxes on your way. So yesterday, I put another 3 boxes into my vehicle and moved them to Ciudad Juarez. So the story is basically that I try to connect people. My job is to connect people and connect need with possibilities, trying to ensure that if it is a Good People Fund or it's individuals in Placitas, New Mexico, or individuals outside of the region that want to connect with shelters in Ciudad Juarez, to ensure that potentially new Americans, while they wait patiently on the Mexican side, have a little bit of hope, a glimpse of possibilities, have a way to have a smile, can have basic needs to meet their priorities. That's where I come in, and I said, maybe I can do something about it. So it's about connecting people with possibilities. My training is in social work. I believe in social justice. I try my best to ensure that we mitigate the realities of homelessness. But between now and then, my job is to try to bring a little bit of hope and a sense of dignity and support. So that's part of the story.
Okay. You are also a poster child for the Good People Fund, seeing a problem and going and fixing it. Kristen, next up.
Yes, I kind of fell into this work. My husband is in the military and we move all the time. And we had recently come to Miami, and I was looking for a way to get involved. I'm a returned Peace Corps volunteer. My background is international relations and teaching English as a second language. And I, like all of you, was hearing so much about the Syrian refugee crisis. This was back in early 2017. So I attended a Syrian Supper Club dinner that was held by a local nonprofit organization, and I met 2 Syrian families there. They had been in the US already for about 6 months, and everybody at the dinner, wanted to do whatever we could to help welcome them and feel part of our community in Miami. And they just kept saying again and again, we really need help learning English and we need help getting jobs. So since I have experience teaching English as a second language, I thought, well, great, this is how I can do my little part to help them. And I went to their house the first day. I was paired with a different family who wasn't at this dinner. The family had already been in the US for 1 year. They have 3 school-age kids, and I was prepared with my English lesson. I stayed for 3 hours and we never even touched my English lesson because they brought this huge stack of mail that they didn't understand anything. They didn't know if it was junk mail or something important from the government about their status or their health insurance or something. And then we took all this time going through their mail. I don't speak 1 word of Arabic. They don't speak any English. But I just thought of myself, as a Peace Corps volunteer, or my husband and I also lived in Japan for 4 years when I don't speak any Japanese, and what that experience was like for me. And so I just wanted to take the time to sit with them and walk them through everything. And we got through their mail, and then they brought out another stack of papers from the school. They have 3 school-age kids. And I always tell people, imagine something as simple as a field trip permission form. They're going on Google Translate, they're translating it. It's translating literally as a trip to the field. And they're thinking, after all we've been through, why would I ever give you permission to take my kid to a field? What are you going to be doing at this field? So just little things like this that you and I take for granted because we live here. The mom was pregnant at the time. We were talking about prenatal vitamins, and I left their house that day after 3 hours. And I just felt so overwhelmed for them. And I just kept thinking, like, who were they saving all of those questions for? They've been in the US already for 1 year. If I didn't come today, who were they waiting for? So I went back to the organizers of the dinner and I said, they do need help learning English, but more than that, I feel like they just need a friend. They need a local counterpart in the community who will just help them navigate their life. And I don't speak Arabic, but at least I grew up in the US and I know how our systems work here. And I don't know about food stamps, but I can find the answers for you. And so I blindly volunteered to organize all of the volunteers who wanted to help one of the Syrian families this organization was working with, and that got the ball rolling. So here we are.
Okay. Sloane?
Hi, everyone. It's so lovely to see you and be sharing our panel stage with some of my favorite people in the whole world. I'm Sloane Davidson. I'm the founder and CEO of Hello Neighbor, and we're based here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I'm a Pittsburgh native, but I lived away for about 15 years. And when I moved back, I was 6 months pregnant. And there was something in that journey of returning to where I was from and having my family's support. I had spent 15 plus years of my career focused mostly on international populations and a lot of work with women and girls. And so I've spent a lot of time in countries where refugees come from and other countries as well, sitting on the floor, not always speaking the language, but having work to do. And so sitting with translators, interpreters, and really focusing on how to support women in particular, and also girls. And when I came back to Pittsburgh, I started looking around and realizing, first of all, number one, that I was really positive about the direction Pittsburgh was headed. We had this new, really progressive, fantastic mayor, and it had changed so much since I had grown up here. And two, I really wanted to get to know some of the international populations that called Pittsburgh home. And so I shifted that lens that I had internationally and really focused it here in Pittsburgh. And I was very surprised to learn, as other panelists would be, and most people, that refugees receive 90 days of initial support from their resettlement agency. And then traditionally are supposed to be self-sufficient. And like Kristen said so beautifully, then what? And who are they waiting for? And that road to self-sufficiency can be really, really hard. And so I had that similar journey and awakening as Kristen described, just looking around and seeing a great need, certainly not to save these amazing people. They are making it on their own, and they're more resilient than I could ever imagine, and they will be just fine. But that idea of having a support system, a friend, someone to help guide and just help them back to build back their lives felt like an enormous opportunity, and one that wasn't really being tackled here in Pittsburgh. I went around and had conversations with refugees themselves, interfaith leaders, community leaders, elected officials, foundations, pretty much everybody. I was so sure that this thing in my head existed, this additional layer of support after resettlement. And every time I had those conversations, people were like, this is a really good idea, you should do it. And that's sort of how the idea for Hello Neighbor was born. And that was just shy of 4 years ago. And so in the past 4 years, we've directly matched 125 refugee families from 13 countries of origin with caring Pittsburghers to help guide and support them in their new lives. And beyond our core mentorship program, we now have family service offerings that help pregnant moms and their babies. Navigating the healthcare system is very hard for all of us, for everybody, but having that added layer of being Black or brown, having language access issues and cultural issues can just make the experience almost insurmountable. And then we also have some programs we've launched during the pandemic around direct services, cash assistance, and helping students navigate remote learning. And then lastly, we have a national network called the Hello Neighbor Network, which I think I'll talk about a little bit later in our panel, but that's how I get to interact quite frequently with Kari and Kristen that are here and help support refugee and immigrant organizations all across the country.
Thank you, Sloane. Kari, next up.
Well, I would be remiss if I did not mention, as Kristen did, my Peace Corps volunteer experience. I was also a Peace Corps volunteer in Thailand, and having the experience of living for years in a new culture, learning a new language, you really just gain the empathy that so many Americans who don't travel or get that opportunity probably can't gain. But I am an educator by trade. I was a 20-year public school elementary teacher, and Be Back to Mom is another reason why I started International Neighbors, because as a teacher at an elementary school, Be Back from Nepal, Bhutan was the country of origin for his family of refugees, fell off the monkey bars and of course broke his arm. And Be Back, like hundreds and hundreds of other refugees, I noticed in my teaching career, did not have an emergency contact because his family was resettled and there was not one person that they could actually list on their child's documentation for an emergency contact. So this poor child that I adored was forced to sit in the clinic with me holding his hand, but not able to give him any medicine, not able to drive him directly to the emergency room, which was my maternal instinct, but to wait for 4 hours until his family was located at one of their 2 jobs and a taxi that could bring them to get their child to the emergency room. And for 10 years, I had been saying, like Sloane, somebody should do something. I'm sure there's something that exists. And my gosh, I really wish that there was. I don't think any of us wanted to found an organization. I would much rather it already be done. And the fact that there really isn't anyone that can connect our neighbors to their neighbors and to resources, that was the impetus for creating International Neighbors.
Thank you. As I listen to each of you, there's a word that comes to mind, and that's the concept of community, because it really does run through each of your programs. And it's a word that's overused, but perhaps each of you could comment and share with us why community is so important for these new Americans or aspiring Americans. Just raise your hand, whoever wants to answer first.
So community, as you said, may be an overused term, but I don't think that it can be over exaggerated, because community, if all of us reflect on where we are today or where we turn if we're having a bad day, community in your church, in your synagogue, in your university, we often, Americans, have many, many, many levels of community on which we rely. And so maybe it's an underlying, you don't really find it gratifying until maybe it's gone. But community is built over time, and it is something that I feel like every single person relies on throughout every single day. And for the refugee community, they had to leave their community and their networks behind. So I think it's crucial that organizations like ours are building that community along with them.
Kristen?
Yeah, I was just going to add to that. I think all of us, if we weren't sure about our community before COVID-19, have really had that come full right to the front and center for all of us. And I think it helped all of us realize how much we really do rely on our community. And so for us, we feel like it's helped our audience see what our families are going through. They're living in this isolation before we came along. And a lot of people are surprised to know, first of all, that there are any Syrian refugees or refugees from Eritrea living in Miami, because in Miami, almost all of those refugees and immigrants who come from Latin America. But then they'll say, like, well, don't they have each other? Can't they just rely on each other? But they can't. And our families in particular, I'm not sure in Charlottesville and El Paso and Pittsburgh, but our families are very far apart from one another, like 1.5 hours from one another, and don't have transportation. And so being able to be an organization that brings all of these people together to form that community for them is really, really important.
I wanted to add immediately, I think of comunidad in Spanish, what really means communal spaces where people can come together, either in person or virtual or a combination, to feel safe, to be a part of belonging. The experience of forced migration, for whatever the reason might be, could be so traumatic, could be so impactful that I think that finding a sense of community, a sense of bonding, I call it the gomita in Espanol, sort of like the glue that holds people together, is critical. Without a sense of community, you're isolated. We know what isolation does to the spirit. We know that it's connected to potential chronic stress. We know that it can deteriorate your life and your health and can produce early loss, disability, and even death. So really a sense of community or communities, I think, is critical when you're on the move, whatever that move or migration would be. Now, I also think of the communities that new Americans are leaving behind. And what does that mean? When you feel like you have lost a sense of belonging, where you are forced to leave the most precious assets you have, which is your familia, your family, your loved ones, everything that you have worked your life with, because you can no longer live in a safety place. It also reminds me that communities need to ensure that the rights of every citizen and individuals are protected, but given the turmoil and given the negative forces that exist, you have communities that are torn, that are fractured, that are primed for, organization of crime, smugglers, traffickers, that really prey on people's lives. And so to build communities that are safe, where people feel like they can thrive, where they are a member, where they belong without losing their culture, their languages, their identities, I think is someone that we should strive to work every single day to ensure that these communities are really communities that bring out the spirit and lift the people's lives. It's not an easy task. It's a very important thing to do.
I think it's probably hardest for you. You're in a very different situation than our other panelists. Sloane, any comment on this?
Yeah, I'll just close us out to say that, first, we think a lot here at Hello Neighbor about building community within community. And so, yes, we're helping, create that sense of belonging and inclusion across the region. But within Hello Neighbor, pre-pandemic, we would do these large events where we take 150 people to a park and do a potluck, or to a baseball game or a soccer game or to a museum. And the idea was that they could all also see each other. You know, the woman might not be the only woman in the park with the hijab that day. You know, a child might see other people that look like them in a setting. And we also want to create a sense of upstanding. A lot of Americans, for a lot of Americans, refugees and immigrants is a theory. They might support them, they might not, but the reality is that 2/3 of Americans don't interact with a refugee or immigrant on a daily basis. And that's a big problem. And that creates a lot of polarization in our country. And so organizations around the country, you know, this is part of the work that we do. Of course, our core, our hearts, you know, are built to support the refugees and immigrants in our communities. But I also take very seriously our role in helping to educate everyday citizens. And can they educate themselves? Absolutely, they can. But, you know, we do it through storytelling. We do it through interactions. I always say, you don't have to share a language to share a space with someone. And that's why we do a lot that involves arts and crafts, a lot that involves cooking, a lot that just involves time together. I believe the greatest gift that we have is time. And so, you know, to be involved with Hello Neighbor is a time commitment. And we take, you know, and having a high touch program is something I'm really proud of, because we're saying, you know, don't just come in and come out, create a really meaningful relationship with people in your community that you'll know for a long, long time. I want a lot of the families that we introduce to go way beyond the bounds of what Hello Neighbor offers. We're creating a sense and a space and a place for the children in our program to become the future. And I think that can't be underscored.
Thank you. You know, we've been using the term New Americans throughout tonight. And just to be more specific, we're talking about anyone who has come to the United States under extraordinarily difficult circumstances. They're fleeing personal and ethnic persecution, war, trafficking, which leads me to the idea that this is really, in no small way, a psychological journey for so many of these people, or all of them. You know, I don't think anything came through clearer to me as I interacted with all of you over the last 13 months, as we were all trying to adjust to life in a pandemic. What kept coming back to me was, how do people who have been through the circumstances that all of these people have been through, how are they handling it? So I wonder if you would each address that idea of the psychological journey that they're making, and, you know, just turn your mic on when you have some thoughts you want to share. I'm not going to call on you. Kari?
All right, I'm not on the spot at all. So the psychological journey, yes, I do agree that none of the refugees that we serve, none of the refugees that have been resettled to the United States, because as we all know, less than 1% of refugees worldwide actually make it up through the ranks and the biological testing and the background checks, and to be actually given that refugee title, which really is a badge of honor. But the psychological journey that they've all endured, it's unfathomable. I mean, every single refugee has seen death, has smelled death, has witnessed atrocious conditions, and are still I mean, I'm sure I'd be experiencing PTSD and probably in a mental hospital. And, you know, the fact that at least 99% of the refugees that we serve are so grateful for the opportunity to start anew and realize that, you know, that's in the past, just the security of being in a safe place. But the book, What is the What? I can't think of the author right now, but there was a line in that book that said, if you knew what all I'd been through, you would not add any more torture to my life. And that's the thing, and why we all exist probably, is that these are amazing individuals who have already gone through the most unfathomable circumstances. And so why would we re-traumatize them? And a lot of our systems, unfortunately, that look great on paper, but are not in action, they do re-traumatize these folks.
Anyone else want to add to that?
You know, I wanted to add, I'm thinking of children, and I'm thinking of what we know about the brain and what the first 3 years of life represent, and what these children go through, and especially what separation, loss, grief, many times assault, rape may mean, and how much silence do people keep, and then how much they end up disclosing only to become re-victimized, as you said, Kari. All of this, at the end of the day, you know, the body and the brain keep the score of trauma. And if trauma is not adequately named and addressed, it would eventually, we will pay the price. So there's a part of me that says, how much is it that we truly know and understand? How much is it that schools and service providers are actually assessing and working with to ensure that the children, the youth, the adults, and the elderly that are able to make it to the North or to the United States are actually provided with opportunities to, one, protect the cultural and the linguistic and the wonderful identities that they have without losing the essence of who they are. It reminds me of a powerful statement that I picked up from one of the New Americans. She said, "Life has not been easy for us. The war has brought us and our families untold suffering, but the suffering has not broken our spirits. It has only strengthened our resolve to succeed at life as we start over again." The possibility of having hope, of living in a place that allows for safety, that really can ensure the women and the men that their children are going to be free from threats, from crime, from gangs, from the organization of crime, is really powerful. And what sometimes we don't fully understand, or I have a hard time understanding, is that they have escaped their reality to come into a country that has disproportionate inequalities and that can also add to that burden and to those risks. So how do we ensure that those protective factors that they bring are indeed strengthened? How do we build on who they are? How do we ensure that they thrive, that they feel safe and they feel free? How do we make sure that they don't acculturate to our culture, whatever that means? Because we know that the sooner they acculturate to the American way, the sooner they move into the high risk. They become more like the rest of us, losing the essence of the protection. Does that make sense? So just to end, resilience is indeed extremely important. And there's wonderful studies on the power of resilience, but that can not only explain that everyone is resilient and we can leave it at that. So there's more for us, I think, all of us to do in that respect so that we can cope, but we can also allow for the openness to express, and that we need to ensure that we provide the mental and behavioral health services that are very much needed.
The social isolation is really so severe for almost all of these individuals. And for many parts of the world that are still very much living in multi-generational houses and neighborhoods, you know, they've gone away from that support, especially the women, of having, you know, the sisters, the aunties, the moms, the friends, the people around. And so when I started Hello Neighbor, I would talk a lot about the social isolation and the stats and figures around it. Now through the pandemic, I feel like that part of my, my talk, people start nodding their heads. We understand over the past year what social isolation has done. The one note that I'll add to what Eva so beautifully said around resilience is the opportunity to be seen. Very frequently, we are not there. And when I say we, I mean, I'm sure all of us, but here at Hello Neighbor, myself, my staff, the mentors and volunteers we train, we're very serious that you are not there to fix something. Sometimes you are just there to spend time with somebody as an equal. We do a lot of work to say, you are not better than. Your way is maybe not the right way. You might go into someone's home and think you're going to do XYZ and end up drinking Turkish coffee and sitting on the floor and playing with the children. And maybe at the very end, you look at a piece of mail or you do something. That is still meaningful time. Yes. For a lot of our women who are so lacking in self-confidence and language, they are still the masters of the kitchen. I have seen women that, maybe are a little turned in and depressed come alive at the opportunity to cook, to welcome someone into their homes. Many parts of the world, having someone in your home is the deepest respect, is the utmost, of showing of respect to somebody else. And so when I walk in someone's home, I'm their equal. And I think in a lot of cases, they know better than me. And so I am not there to fix them. I am not there to save anybody. That is not our job. Our job is to spend time with people so that they feel seen.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Kristen?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, a couple of us have touched on a lot of people who think like, oh, they've come to the United States, now they're in safety, they should be so happy to be here. A lot of this work is so much about relationship building and walking in somebody else's shoes and realizing all that they've been through and all that they're carrying with them, and thinking about the psychological journey makes me think of this story one of my volunteers is telling me recently. The volunteer is in her 20s and she was reading a story with a girl who she mentors who's in 3rd grade. And this family has already been in the US for 4 years. And in the story, a child died. And the little girl said to the volunteer, well, how did she die? And the volunteer said, I'm not sure. And she was like, do you think it was from a bomb? And the volunteer was so shocked because she said that just wasn't even in her realm of thinking. She said, I'm in my 20s and that's not something that even crosses my mind. And here's this little 9-year-old girl. And that's the first thing that she thinks when she hears that a child has died. And this little girl has been here for 4 years already. And so it's just that journey goes on and on and on. And so when I hear people say like, well, they should be so happy to be here, they're safe now. It's like, yes, but there are a lot of complexities to that.
Yeah. Kari is our guest here with us.
He is here.
He is here. I'm going to go off our little planned script here a little bit. When we were doing a dress rehearsal for this the other night, the idea came up about actually bringing in one of these aspiring Americans, and Kari told us that she had just the right person that she thought. And so I'm going to ask you to bring in Bahati, who is from the Democratic Republic of Congo. Bahati, I would love for you to.
Yes, I'd love to introduce him.
Go ahead.
My good friend and all of our neighbor, Bahati Majuto. He's an amazing, not even an aspiring American any longer, because as I'm not sure if all of the audience knows that you have to be in the States for 5 years, and then you can apply to become a citizen, pass the test, pay almost $1,000 per person, and then become an American. And Bahati has done that in the last year. Bahati Majuto from the DRC, and it is my pleasure. Thank you so much for being here. And Bahati, please
give us your story.
Okay, my name is Bahati Majuto. The first thing I like to say, thank you from International Labour for what you do for me. It make me happy because since I born, I never be happy like this International Labour make me happy. Because I was living, I have a lot of stress for my life since I born. To make short, I leave my country, it was 2002.
Democratic
Republic
of
of Congo, 2002. It was night, it was fire, all the city was bomb, everything. So that time I was have a small baby child, 2 boy and 1 girl. That 2002. That time the robber come to attack from my house, the place I was living, and the father, mother, and the brother, sister. So that time, because it was very, very, very fired, so everyone ran that night. People come, we break the house, and then I take my wife and the small baby. He was lucky. Mary he born 2002. He's lucky 3 weeks like that small baby. That time I ran to 90 and that to my 2 children, boy and that small baby. I moved from my house and then my wife, I ran to river. He's calling Tanganyika. If you see Lake Tanganyika. That time it was night like 12 night. Yeah. Sorry for my English.
His English is great. Oh my
I don't know
goodness.
if you hear what I'm talking.
As we all
Sorry.
know, if you have an accent, that
Yeah.
means you are brave
Yeah.
and you're amazing. And this is only his 4th language, so we can.
So, yeah, so that time I ran to Lake Tanganyika and there I meet the people. This one he use boat, small boat in the river there, and they help me and then my wife put in the boat and they take me to Burundi.
So from DRC to Burundi.
That's in 2002. So that time I never have knew where is my family, father, mother, brother, 2002. Time I arrived to Burundi, I start to find how I can start life there because it's new country. I don't know how I can survive for that country. So I live for that city. I was know how I can sew the clothes.
He's a great tailor.
So
amazing tailor.
Is that the work I was doing there to Burundi? I lived there 2002, 3, 4. 2004, I was going to town to work, sewing clothes, because time I go there, I round to find the what place I can see, the place I can see like small people working, and then I can try to explain, I do this, I can do this. So I get a small place there, and I start to do sewing clothes there. 2004, it was morning, I went to work like 8 a.m., like 80, because the work there sometimes start 80 morning. Time I go to work is like 12-1, 2004. The rocket start in the city there to Burundi.
So not only the place of his birth was attacked, but then Burundi also attacked.
That time in 2004, the time the rocket was coming in the city again there. So that time I tried to find the bus. The bus I go in, that bus he ran for another country to Tanzania. I never go see my wife, child. Where is he there?
They were separated for 4 years.
Yeah.
His wife and his son is now a senior at William and Mary.
Yeah.
So talk about resilience.
Yeah. So that time I ran, I'm already Tanzania. No history back here. Where is my wife? Where is my 2 children?
Tanzania is the 3rd country you were
in. So there I lived there like 1 week, and then I go to Malawi. Malawi situation was very bad. I go to Mozambique. I go there, I go to South Africa.
Can I interrupt? How are you traveling to all these countries?
Time I go there, I go in the truck. Truck is that the people from truck that was helping me.
Yeah.
You go like
with chickens and animals.
Yeah, so you pass like that. So time I arrive to South Africa, I go to Cape Town. Cape Town, I start to find out again how I can start for that country. 2004, I try to find the place I can see how I can go to do sewing clothes there because that's what I was doing there. I start 2004 to work. No history. Where is my wife? That time, no news.
All by himself, not knowing where his wife and son was.
Yeah. So that time I work 2004, 5, 6. 7, and then that time I try to find who I can try to find the information from Burundi. I can know where is my wife because I was no peace in the heart. I'm alone. I don't know the child if he's still alive.
Talk about trauma.
Yeah. So that time I never sleeping. I don't know where is my brother, where is my sister, where is my mother. So it was like I'm going like crazy that time. So one guy I was trying to find them to try to ask he was Tanzania. Say, okay, one day I see your wife in the market from Burundi. I said, no, man, please try to help me. I can know how I can communicate again for my wife. Because since 2004, no story since today is like 2007.
Can you imagine?
So that time, you go around, that guy say, I see your wife, one place the people sell it like rice. That was going to find how we can live in that child to sell it, that small stuff like that. And at that time, we take the cell phone for him. I communicated with my wife for the first time. That time I was crying.
I'm sure you were.
The first time I asked him, where is my children? Because since the bomb we was starting in Burundi, I was no history if he's still alive. And they tell me the child is okay. So that time I was very happy. And then I tried to find the money, how I can tell him we can come with the child in there, South Africa.
So you reunited with your wife and son in South
Africa, yeah.
And then how many years later did you come to Charlottesville? What year did you come to Charlottesville?
Yeah, I come 2012.
2012.
So time I communicated and my wife was 2008, and then he came South Africa 2008. Since 2004, I meet him again 2008, South Africa.
Oh.
Time we arrived there, it was like 1 week, xenophobia attack start. For that country. Yeah, 2000.
Xenophobia.
Yeah, xenophobia. People lose everything. I was doing my business already, container, I do sewing, everything. The people come with banning everything. I lose everything.
And I think it's to be shown that to be knocked down time and time again, as he has, and to have never given up, right? And every single country of refuge that you sought still was under attack. So to be here in America, if I can share something amazing that has happened in the last month, I have goosebumps, but just as Bahati explained, being separated from his wife and son, who is now graduating from William and Mary College, he just located his brother and sister in a refugee camp in Uganda after 19 years.
19 years, yeah, so.
And he's like, he came to us and said, how can I get him here? And I'm like, I don't know, but this is why it's such a reciprocal relationship. He's teaching me. I've never done an I-30 form before. Of course, I never started a nonprofit before, but hey, I can Google and I can read it.
Yeah.
And to hear them speaking to each other after 19 years, and we are going to get his brother and his sister, and now your little sister has a baby. She's a mother herself.
After 19 years,
Wow.
I come here, America, 2012, before I come here, America. I try to find, sometimes I write in the Facebook, you can see like a friend, the name, we was living same city, like Congo. I try, one day I catch the name for one guy, he was like same city. And they tell me, in the Facebook, we say, Uganda. I try to write for him. I ask, is you, this name can be, I say, yeah, it's me. And they ask me, since 2002, no story you heard from home, because 2002, mother, brother, sister, no story for me. He said, yeah, he told me, one day I see your brother in the camp in Nakivale, Uganda. I said, really? I said, yes. He gave me the name for camp. And because the camp have like alphabet. Nakivale Kambi, the number for Kambi was B, the place you see my brother there, B Kambi. So I say, okay. Since that day, I call him, I never get him again for phone because it's 2011, is that 2012 time I come in here, I try to sit down. I think I never sleep all day. Every time I sit, I never sleep. I say, then one day I was in the computer for my child, and I see the name like Red Cross. And they say, can enjoy people together if people is separated by.
So our local Red Cross helped to reunite. They helped find him.
Yeah, people. So that's, and I tell my wife and my son, because he speaks a good English. I tell him.
And you speak good English too.
No, I'm trying.
Yes, you're great.
I'm trying. I tell my son, let me to go from Red Cross to ask by this address for this camp. Maybe can help us. I go in my son for that Red Cross. I explain. Red Cross asking me, you have the name for camp? I told the Red Cross, yes, I have the name. Somebody give this name, and I have the name for my brother. He said, if you have the name for camp and the name for your brother, you can try to write the letter and then you can try to see what is the answer to gonna get. I write the letter in the Red Cross inside the papa. It was in 2018. 2018, if I don't forget. That letter, the letter is gone. I waiting. Every day I ask Red Cross, no answer, say no answer.
So much waiting.
Yeah. So 2000, this month, 2000, it was February 2021. I see the Red Cross say, call me. But here is news for you. So what news? I say, it's good news, and again it can be bad news for you. I said, what? I say your heart must be strong.
Right.
Yeah, before to tell you this story. And they tell me, I say, okay, no problem. You can tell me that the story you get from Uganda. They say, okay, your brother is still alive. I say, thank you, God, the first thing. I say, thank you, God, if he's still alive. And then I say, he told me another story, say, your brother, for this letter I sent you, it says, the wife who was killing, wife and the children. You have 2 twins, and the one was the 3. So,
Your brother's son?
Yeah, he killed, 2015, he killed the wife and that children.
So he lost his wife and child in Congo. Just like how many of your family members did not survive that?
Yeah, since now it was me, that my brother, is another 4 since today, no story for me. I tried to ask him, right. He said he don't have news. Yeah.
Right.
Kari?
So what people overcome and then, bring skills as Bahati does of being a tailor, and to overcome so much trauma. It's truly remarkable.
Kari, this is an amazing story, and I know that we would all love to continue to hear it. We've got people with
phone number.
Bahati, I just want to say
this one is like an engine for me for this organization.
I'm not the angel.
It's like God has sent him for me.
Well,
Kari, I want you to please keep us informed as to how or if we could help with the resettlement. And I think this is the rest of the story. We're going to all wait to hear how the rest of this story
and it's financial support
turns out.
With the Good People Fund has made so many things possible. I know at International Neighbors, we are forever grateful to have your support, Naomi, and all the Good People Fund.
Well, this is Bahati is a wonderful poster child for just how important all of this work is. I wanted to, there was one other question that I wanted to throw out to all of you. We know that there are some very loud voices in this country that have been very vocal about the anti-newcomer group. How does it affect your work, to each of you? How have you seen that? Have you seen it? I can't imagine that you haven't, but how specifically have you seen that play out? If you can share a little bit of that briefly with all of us. I think that this is a really very important topic. So any one of you jump in and share your thoughts about this part of our country. Kari?
I'll jump in and start. And first, I want to give a plug for a campaign called the Belonging Begins With Us campaign. And that's the name of the URL as well, Belonging Begins With Us. It's a campaign from the Ad Council that was launched in the past year. The Hello Neighbor Network was one of the grassroots partners helping to spread the word about this, along with Welcoming America, the Center for Inclusion and Belonging, a number of other really great groups. And the Ad Council really does these multi-year campaigns to move the needle on specific issues, does a lot of data and persona work, and then launches a really, meaningful campaign. And what they found in the research was the best opportunity we have, us in the space and those that are supportive of refugee and immigrant issues, is to focus on the groups that in theory believe in refugees and immigrants, but don't actually know them every day. I know I sort of referenced this concept earlier in the hour. Those are, very specific groups of people that are out there. They most likely go to church. They do have a social network, in their communities, but they might live in places where they're just not interacting on a day-to-day basis. And so there's actually a huge middle group that if we could move them along and get them not just in theory, but actually supporting voting, both locally, county, statewide, and federally in support of refugee immigrant issues, that could really, move the issue forward. The second piece that I think is really important is that we cannot allow for immigrants and refugees to be separate parts of the conversation or to be pinned against each other. This has frequently happened in politics the last 30, 40 years. Refugees come fully vetted, immigrants are sometimes coming over the border and they're undocumented or illegal, which is not a term that we should use, right? No person is illegal. And so I feel very strongly that we need to come together as refugee and immigrant organizations, and we need to really create a coalition. We need to create collaborations, and we need to say we are one voice and we are moving this forward. While the majority of the families we serve are refugees, by definition, we are fully supportive here as an organization for comprehensive immigration reform and for all of the protections that are required for everyone across the immigration suite. And I think that's critically important. We can't be pinned, against each other. And the third part that I'll mention, then I'll turn over to my other esteemed panelists, is that we have an incredible opportunity with our volunteers and with the people that support us. So not just us as organizations or staff, but for the people that support us, to give them the information to go to their water cooler, their Thanksgiving dinner table, their places of influence. The studies have shown the greatest influence that you have in your network is somebody you know. It's not a politician, it's not the media, it's someone that that you're sharing a space with. And so we work really hard to give our volunteers and the refugees and communities we serve the storytelling power, the confidence to go out, and when somebody says something derogatory, inflammatory, racist, xenophobic, sexist, whatever the case may be, that they can speak up and they feel comfortable speaking up, and they feel comfortable speaking up on behalf of their fellow neighbors.
So, and I think that was,
that, Ava?
yeah, that was brilliant, because I think that you highlighted a very important point. I think the way that we speak, how we write, how we refer to each other does matter. So therefore, the terms that we use, the language that we place, we need to be much more mindful of how we speak about each other and the humanity of the other being a reflection of me. And that's part of the conversation, that there is this dichotomy of the other, and then there is the me. But it's not about the me, it's about the we. And so how do we move the needle in a conversation where we understand that we exist because the other exists? And that no, we may be different in our approach, but at the end of the same, we're part of that humanity. And it's a humanity that includes us all. And by the way, we all have a history of some mobility, migration, and that in itself has enriched who we are. Being mindful that it's the fear of the unknown, the fear of the other that is grounded in, that builds on hate, which then grounds itself on racism, which then fuels on discrimination, which then places the stigma, the biases, all those other terms that get so much traction in some media, that we're going to have to figure out continuous ways on how to dismantle, and how to do that in a way that we don't get angry, which is very difficult, because sometimes the things that we hear, the things that we read, the way that our own members of family speak about the other, I don't have to go very far. My family is a family that is a result of immigration, migration, opportunity. And yet there's something that happens sometimes, luckily, not all, that you sort of like advance and you tend to forget where you come from, but only to realize that now the other one is not deserving. I don't know if that makes any sense, but for me, that's a constant battle, that I have to find ways to say, well, again, where do we come from? So who are the roots? Where do we build our identity? And how do we share responsibility and humanity? I think the I am you, you are me approach is so important because it tends to really put us on the same ground. Understanding that there is enough, for God's sake, enough wealth and enough resources for everyone to have and share and to really enrich and do. And it starts with self. So there's a part of me as a social worker, I'm trained to do micro, meso, and macro work, but at the end of the day, it's where do I see the most possibility of advancing the needle in the direction of inclusion, diversity, and respect? Knowing that there's going to be some times where, no, it's almost impossible to have a conversation with someone that is totally turned off, which in this case, I'm just going to say, I stop using any energy and time that I have left so that I can dedicate on the other, because the other might be where a possibility of sign change might take place. But how to do that in a way without creating more polarization and really engaging an ongoing dialogue is really important. So I'm looking for answers and I'm working on that. So if you have answers, I want to gravitate to you so that you can help me reframe those conversations. I also wanted to give kudos to the Framework Institute, because the Framework Institute has a really powerful way of helping us to reframe very difficult conversations in such a way that we're able to always be mindful about who the audience is. And keeping the audience in mind, then we can craft messaging in such a way that we can begin to have a dialogue.
Kristen, did you want to add something quickly to that?
Thank you, Eva. That was amazing.
Pretty profound.
Yeah, it was. I don't know what to say after you. I was just going to add on the side of, anti-newcomer, one thing that has really impacted all of our organizations is the refugee admission number. That is set by the president, and in the past 4 years, it has been at the lowest it's ever been in the history of the U.S. refugee admissions program. And so that, of course, makes our work really, really difficult. And we are here and we're not going anywhere. And we work as hard as we can to continue welcoming the families that we work with and getting our communities involved. And I mean, like Sloane said, and Eva, and I know Kari does this too, we encourage our volunteers to build relationships that last long past our work. But the fact of the matter is we can only welcome as many refugees that are allowed into the country. And so that is a really, really big factor in our work. And we're all waiting on pins and needles for President Biden to sign the presidential determination to allow more refugees to come into the US, but that is something that directly impacts our work.
I suspect that you're all going to be facing some significant needs because the numbers are probably going to be considerably higher than what they have been in the past.
Yes.
That's certainly the indications that we're getting. I just wanted, before we closed, I wanted to give Sloane an opportunity to share a little bit about the Hello Neighbor Network, which we were really very honored and privileged to help get going a few years ago. When I was talking to Sloane, I guess it was 2 years ago, when you were thinking about this, I immediately agreed with you that setting up a network, because there are so many Kristens and Sloanes and Karis who have, gotten together in a more formal way outside of what Ava is doing across the country, and how much you could all learn from each other. So Sloane, could you give us just a brief description of the network and what you've been able to accomplish?
Happy to. Thank you for giving the space for that. So it is a lonely road being a founder and being an executive director of a nonprofit. We advocate so much for the refugees and immigrants that we support, but it's hard on us as well. And as Hello Neighbor was growing, a lot of people were reaching out and they wanted to learn more. But the most insightful and honest conversations were with other people in the space. I remember the first time I talked to Kari, and it was like the wall came down and we just shared so much of what was happening. And as those informal and formal conversations continued, I realized that there was a huge gap and a huge opportunity in finding ways to have us collaborate, create community amongst ourselves, and ultimately find a way towards sustainability and scalability of our organizations. The truth is that for the majority of grassroots and community-based nonprofits, their funding will be local. So every once in a while, you find a great funder like the Good People Fund that's looking around for really fantastic nonprofits around the country. But most grassroots and community-based nonprofits are raising money at home. And so the idea for the Hello Neighbor Network was, well, let's bring those people together. Let's find a way to help support the leaders. And if you support the leaders, you support the organizations. If you support the organizations, you support the communities that ultimately they're serving. And so that's really what we did. We started with 8 founding members, and we now have 23 members from 17 states. And it's Charlottesville and Miami, Missoula, Montana, LA, South Bend, Indiana, Washington, DC, Mobile, Alabama, you name it. And these are incredible leaders, some of whom are refugee or immigrant identifying and working within their communities. And some like Kari, Kristen and I, just care very deeply, and we've worked incredibly hard to build these organizations. And the idea is that over time, this coalition will build and that we'll be able to support each other. And we do a lot of different things. One of which I will comment on here is regranting. So some of our funders have come to us and said, we'd love to fund more things in the refugee and immigrant space. It's a lot of due diligence. Like, how do we find the groups that are really doing the good work? And I've said, well, I know who they are. Why don't you give me if you could give me the funding, then I will help disperse it to them and we'll run the grant process for you. And so there've been some really great family organizations all the way up to, larger corporate funders that are really excited about that opportunity. And then the other thing that we do outside of monthly get-togethers, webinars, and calls is an annual convening. I dropped the link into the chat. 2/3 of that is private or invite only, really centered around the leaders that we're supporting. But there is a public day this year since we're in Zoom world, and we wanted people from all around the country to be able to come. And that is free. It's this upcoming Wednesday. And it is not only for refugee or immigrant serving nonprofits, it's really for anybody in the nonprofit space or that works alongside refugees or immigrants and wants to really spend some time with us thinking about it. And it's going to be a really packed, great agenda. And I'd love to see some of the attendees here tonight again on Wednesday. Thank you, Naomi.
Okay, thanks, Sloane. We're looking forward to being part of that as well. I want to thank everybody who's on this call, because I'm looking at the numbers and we're not losing too many people, even though we've gone over. I think this conversation has been, beyond our expectations. There were a number of questions in the chat box. We're not going to have time to get to them, but I will just say to everyone that tomorrow an email will go out to everybody who was part of this. It will have links to all the organizations. There'll be a recording probably within a minute or two after we end tonight. This will be up on YouTube. And I just can't thank all of you enough for taking more time out of your life to be with us tonight. I really think that your stories are incredibly moving, and I hope that everyone who has listened in has been moved and inspired, and I can't imagine that they haven't been. I think there were a lot of incredible lessons that we have all heard from each one of you this evening. I want to again thank everybody who has tuned in, and the links and everything will be out tomorrow. I also want to thank Glenn Rosenkrantz, who is our communications consultant, and Boris Giebski, who is the magic man behind all the technology. And of course, Andrea Good, who without whom I would not function. This little organization manages very well with a few resources and some incredibly good people. And we're just beyond excited to have had this opportunity to be with you all tonight. And thank you again, and good night.
Thank you. Thank you. Good night.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Good night.